Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April executive meeting. Hope you didn't get caught in an April shower. It's one of those days, I think. Quite a full house today, but quite a slim agenda. Ms Willis, any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies.
I did put it on before. Did it go off here? So I pressed it down. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, the minutes of meeting from 19th of March 2024. Everybody okay with them?
Agreed.
Agreed? Okay, I shall sign those. Any declarations of interest from anybody on today's agenda? No? Okay. Item number 4, public question time. I'm under the impression we don't have any questions. So we'll move on to item 5, although anybody from the public, welcome to ask questions on a subsequent occasion, please. Point number 5 on the agenda, questions by members. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got a question about the Council's finances, so I don't know, it might be for the finance portfolio holder. So former Prime Minister Liz Truss has been telling the BBC that she's not responsible for crashing the economy and all the chaos and devastation to household finances that caused. Is it possible to estimate how much damage was done to the Council's finances by Liz Truss's mini budget? Thank you.
Am I allowed to give my best guess on that, Mr. Ramtahal?
Thank you.
My apologies, members. I don't know what I'm doing, but it seems to be turning itself off every 2 seconds. Let's try rebasing it. I can refer to a statement I've made previously in this chamber around that, Councillor Wilson, but I think it wasn't in general perceived to be good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Councillor Rowlands, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask whether it's not our responsibility, but at the moment there's absolute chaos in the avenue where major gasworks are taking place. I have asked to have some idea of where they're moving from, sectioning off various roads, etc., as they move through it, but I haven't been able to get any response on that. I think it's important, although it's a county responsibility, that we actually know where over these 18 weeks where they'll be moving to and what particular roads are being closed. And I think it's only a matter of goodwill that county lets us know exactly what's happening. I have asked that from the county councillor, but had no result. I wondered if you would have a better success at getting the precise information out of them.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. I don't get to see any programme. I don't know if anybody else in the council does get the programme from Surrey County Council in terms of their plans for the roads within the borough. You do, thank you. Okay. Maybe it's something, but it's a fair point. Maybe we can at least follow up and find out how do we get access to that information, which I think is your point, Councillor Rowlands, and then we can obviously share it with residents. So if we could take note of that and see what we can do. Have we had any feedback, Councillor Ashby, on various issues we've raised around transport with Surrey?
As yet, we haven't managed to put a mechanism in place where we can regularly exchange information with county. I have been working with their parking enforcement subcontractor to answer some of the questions that were brought up in previous meetings. They did respond to me. I'm awaiting further information from them. That was specifically on the parking. With regarding to the rolling gasworks, we had a very similar issue recently in Frimley as they replaced a gas main with four-way traffic lights causing a significant amount of chaos. I was also unable to get a programme from county on that beyond what the gas board put through. So I will follow up and ask if there is any information that we can get on that, but I suspect that the gas board, when they do it, are not necessarily keeping county up to speed either as they move from one area to another. I don't know, that's just a feeling.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Any other member questions? Yes, please, Councillor McGrath.
Sorry, just to say with the county councillor of my ward, he actually, I think he has it so we all set up, so we all get the information when anything's going on in our wards. Okay, just...
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. So if we have any queries, we'll send them to you then, in terms of what Surrey's up to. Yeah, I know, he's doing a decent job there. Thank you for updating us on that. Yeah. Is it the same county councillor, by the way, that between yourself and Councillor Rowlands? Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. The Camberley West is the county division.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Leader. On question on communications with the public, so it's probably under the Leader's portfolio. So as we've just seen, I guess this council seems to have restricted communications during the pre-election period, perhaps a bit more than some other public bodies. For example, there was no communications from this council that I could see to the public about the signing of the Armed Forces Covenant, and that could have been used to help signpost veterans in the borough to council services. So I think there would have been justification for that communication. In contrast, Guildford Borough Council on Transgender Awareness Day posted on social media photos of the pride flag on their flagpole and supportive statements about that. And this council, although it flew the flag, did not make any communication on social media about it. Also, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, another public body bound by the same rules, they seem to have been posting and tweeting with almost no restrictions, just not putting photographs of the incumbent on it. And they were posting and tweeting about their achievements in the past few years until I complained and they had to delete them. But their tweets are still a lot more permissive, I think is probably the word, than our councils are. So I guess my question is the council's approach to communications in the pre-election period consistent with other public bodies and their interpretation of their responsibilities? Thank you.
I think it's. I think the rules are clear. I mean, obviously they're documented, and as you say, it's then down to interpretation. So we employ professional officers to give us advice in these things, and then we have to abide by those by that guidance. I think it's fair to say, Mr. Rampetar and I have the occasional moment where we say, where is the edge, and can we go a little bit nearer it? And we will continue to have those conversations, and he will continue to give me professional advice as to how we and others how we handle that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr. Rampetar, to that. You would. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And just very briefly, there'll probably be examples of councils that are more strict than us, or just as strict, or less strict. So there's a spectrum of interpretations of the guidance, the statutory guidance. So it's very difficult to kind of, I think, pick examples without looking across the board.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Please, Councillor Whitcroft.
Sorry, not a question. Apparently some councillors are unable to access the meeting online.
We'll just take, do we know who it is?
I don't know, I've just had a couple of messages saying that people can't get in.
It might be worth
We'll just
checking
take- we'll
if
just
they're
take
trying
1
to
minute.
access it via Zoom and not via Teams, because both the invites went out.
Right. Well, what was your IT guidance there, please, Councillor Wheeler? What's the preferred?
So initially I tried to access via Teams, which
Yeah.
wouldn't let me in, so they need to access via Zoom.
Right. If you wouldn't mind sharing the news.
Yeah, perhaps, Ms Willis, would you mind just sending the link round to the councillors' email addresses again, and I'll just let them know that they're on their way, please.
Thank you. We'll just take a small pause while Ms Willis has a chance to do that. And while she's doing that, I can update you that we are going to change tonight's programme, a little bit like the Hope Hub variety show the other night, which I saw a few of you at. They tweet the programme there as well. And congratulations to them, by the way, on raising £2,500. So we're going to switch items 6 and 7. So we'll go first with item 7, which is Camberley Theatre Future Options. The reason for that is we believe we'll have to go into exempt for item 6, whereas we may avoid it for item 7. It was also good to see a number of previous councillors at the event on Sunday night. Good, I can move on. I'm not very good at ad-libbing anyway, so I've run out of content now. Okay, so we move on to item 7, Camberley Theatre Future Options. Councillor Skipper, do you want to introduce the, as portfolio holder, introduce the topic, please?
Thank you, Leader. Since opening as a civic hall in 1966, Camberley Theatre has hosted a vast and varied array of shows and prestigious headline acts for the benefit of our community. As we all are acutely aware, like many similar buildings in this era, we face the challenge of RAC, reinforced autoclave aerated concrete. To date, our specialist surveyor has given us the green light to remain open and successfully trading, but further assessment is required. To this end, yesterday the doors of Camberley Theatre closed for a temporary period so that we can undertake further detailed inspections of the bar and main stairwell. We have to be realistic that there is the potential for worst case scenario that those further investigations could result in the theatre having to remain closed for a longer period, while the council decides how best to address the issues found. We are hopeful that this will not be the case and we will be able to reopen whilst a plan for whatever remediation is required. Last week, Council approved an increase to the capital programme to cover the estimated cost of remediation of the wreck. This ensures that, subject to your agreement with the recommendation put before the Executive, we will be in a position to remediate wreck quickly and efficiently, keeping the doors closed for the shortest possible period and allowing us to reopen for pantomime in 2024. The costings before you in Annex 1 are based on the estimate developed by the Council's Technical Services Manager, and my thanks go out to him and the theatre team for their hard work and dedication in pulling this project and executive report together. We sincerely hope that the level of remediation will be less than has been presented, and we will endeavour to deliver this project in the most cost and time efficient way possible. In bringing you this report, myself and the officers consider several options as shown in 2.6 of this report. The recommendation before you ensure that the theatre is closed for the shortest period to allow us to resolve the rack issue that we faced. It also avoids impacting upon our tenants and partners within the Ian Goodchild Centre, and whilst we would like to have included options to decarbonise the theatre, at the same time, these would have extended the period the theatre would need to close and affected our tenants through the loss of services while the works were being carried out. Decarbonisation of the theatre is something we are looking into, including an approach that would enable the majority of this type of work to be completed while the theatre remains operational. Every effort has been made to limit the loss of income which will result from the temporary closure of the theatre by undertaking the RAC mitigation work at a relatively quiet time within the theatre calendar and through careful rescheduling of shows and regular hires. Last week, officers circulated the results of an audience survey which precedes a wider economic, social and cultural impact assessment of the theatre. What this report shows is the huge level of support the theatre has amongst respondents and that the theatre is a fundamental driver for visits to Camberley, and the overall impact of the theatre was primarily deemed to be significant. To enhance what is already a successful theatre and to ensure it continues to provide a rich and varied programme, I intend to develop a cultural committee to widen the approach of Camberley Theatre as part of the more joined-up cultural offer in the borough, whilst increasing attendance at the theatre. Given the decision of the Council last Wednesday, I would like to propose a change to the recommendation in front of you. The revised recommendation is as follows. Executive resolve that 1. The remediation works as set out in the report are conducted, funded from the allocation of £625,000 in the Council Capital Programme, and 2. The delivery of the project, including minor changes to the project plan or expenditure within the budget, be delegated to the Strategic Director for Environment and Community in consultation with the Portfolio Holder for Leisure and Culture and Strategic Director for Finance and Customer Services. I encourage you to approve the recommendation before you and support the remediation of Camberley Theatre so it can be an important asset of our borough. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Skipper. I think you were right to highlight the work that's gone into this whole exercise and to make sure we have good information in front of us, particularly Ms Stockley, Ms McCubbin and Mr Stevens, obviously supported by others. It's a complex area and questions and clarifications from all of us under welcome. Councillor Betton, please.
Thank you. My question is in two parts, really. The first relates to the summary, where it says, whilst the theatre is currently considered as safe by the specialist surveyor, if it's safe, why is it closed for 3 weeks for evaluation? And the second point is the evaluation, I believe, started on the 15th. When do we think we'll have a report from that process?
Thank you, Councillor Betton. Mr Stevens, do you want to pick up those two items? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Betton. So, in relation to the fact that the theatre is currently considered safe, that is based on the areas of RAC that the specialist surveyor has been able to inspect. And I'm pleased to report that as of yesterday, that specialist surveyor came back to inspect the stage roof and has confirmed there's no further deterioration there. So that's welcome, and that does mean that once we've undertaken these further investigatory works, assuming that they don't show any further issues, we'll be ready to reopen within 3 weeks' time. We only know what we know, and clearly there are still areas that need to be exposed so we can see the extent of the rack and any particular problems there may be with it. So the key areas are the stairwell on the first floor as you walk up towards the studio, if you're familiar with that part of the theatre, and also the bar area where there is a plaster ceiling beneath the rack planks. There were effectively inspection panels cut into that ceiling, but that doesn't allow the specialist surveyor enough access to give us a properly informed opinion of that area. There have been sections that have been made safe there. There are propped areas within that bar. We need to ensure that we have a thorough inspection and that pockets are cut. This is cuts into the rack itself so they can see the reinforcement within and how that sits on the bearings. So there is still more work to do, and that's why we have to close this 3-week period to have a full picture of the current condition of the theatre.
If we could, I think Councillor Betton might just have a follow-up. Take that one first, okay? Councillor Garrett, please.
That's very encouraging. Given that, as we know, a lot of people just read summaries, and to have that first statement is currently considered as safe by the specialist surveyor, when we are still in the process of surveying, I think could be better written.
Thank you, Councillor Betton. Councillor Garrett?
Thank you, Leader. And if you'd like, let me, I've just got a little bit of a statement before my question, in view of the fact we didn't get lots of chances to say much at the full council. I've been a councillor for just under 5 years now. What many in the chamber don't know is about 15 years before becoming a councillor, I was involved in Amateur Dramatic Society, which was registered charity and raised money for children with special needs. For 10 of those years, I produced a musical every year, dedicating 6 months of my life to staging shows. Myself, having trodden the boards, since moving to Camberley over 20 years ago, me and my family have visited Camberley Theatre on a regular basis and have been regular to see the pantomime. My own daughter has been on the stage at Camberley Theatre on a number of occasions. It is fair to say I'm a massive supporter of the arts and certainly the facilities we have within our borough. When Councillor Skipper mentioned he was looking to set up a cultural committee to discuss the theatre and how it is to be supported, I was one of the first to say I would like to be involved in these discussions. With all this in mind, I was very disappointed to hear in the chamber last week and also on social media that it was made out that I and my group were not supporting the theatre. As outlined above, I am a massive supporter of the arts, and unlike some members of this chamber, don't just join the bandwagon when they believe there is a political momentum to be gained by making out they care. What we were not supportive of was receiving papers 5 hours before the meeting, which we were then asked to discuss and make decisions on, agreeing to allocate £625,000 to the capital budget. In the past, I've heard in this chamber acquisitions that previous administrations had rushed through papers without the ability to discuss them thoroughly. The situation we found ourselves in last week seemed to be very much like the pot calling the kettle black. Now, on reading this paper, it's great to hear that the year 22-23 resulted in the lowest ever subsidy of the theatre at £130,000. This goes to prove that this venue is still a great asset to Surrey Heath, and the recent varied event programme has proven popular very locally. The breakdown in Annex 1 totals £625,000, which I note includes estimates and contingency. If, when the investigations have taken place, there is a requirement to allocate more funds, do I assume this will once again need to come back to the full council? The investigation started yesterday, so I appreciate we'll have no information at this stage, although we've heard some potentially good news already. After 3 weeks have passed, I assume there will be a full report, which will come back to executive, for us better to understand the status and the next steps, which I think, in fairness, Mr. Stevens has already answered. It's good to see the responses from the recent questionnaire, and the residents of Surrey obviously support these great facilities. I would like to ask the leader to confirm that his administration will do everything in his power to make sure that we don't lose this great facility. Thank you.
Quite a lot to unpack there, Councillor Garrett. What I can assure the members of, which I think was communicated last week, and if it wasn't communicated correctly, then I apologise, that you got the information concerning the increase to the capital budget that we believe was required at the earliest possible juncture. There were a number of unfair statements made last week, including references to the House of Fraser building, where there were no papers came to this, either this executive or the full council for their approval. And I would welcome if any members want to set the record straight on that. Nevertheless, we did it in openness and transparency at the earliest possible moment. I accept the feedback from members that it was last minute. It was just asking to increase the headroom. We could have chucked in some numbers into the budget previously, but we had no basis to put those numbers in, and therefore it is not prudent and appropriate to do that. Moving forward from there, it is our intention to maintain a cultural offering within the borough. What that might be, I think, is still open at the moment as we try and navigate our way through this particular problem, which you will note I have not blamed on the previous administration. So you can take that one for the minutes if you wish. Though we have checked all the previous condition monitoring reports to see whether it was visible or not to anybody, and it wasn't. So we have reports from not that long ago that say that pretty much everything's fine and dandy. So this rack problem, as we all appreciate, has been something that maybe certain people in certain places within the public sector and and I don't know, building surveyors weekly knew about, but the rest of us were not so aware until recently. So this is a genuine black swan that has come out across Camberley, and it falls on this executive to try and manage it the best we can. Hence the transparency in bringing forward the paper last week to provide the headroom for the decisions potentially tonight around how do we manage the situation. I think I've answered most of your points. If you want to come back on anything specifically you think I haven't covered, then please do so, Councillor Garrett.
Now it's working for me. I think you have. I think my only concern is, and I'm hoping I'm being really, the figures are saying 625. If they obviously do find any major works, I'm guessing that anything else above that would have to come back to.
Correct. No. Yeah, if it requires capital, obviously it would have to come back to full council, yeah. So, anybody else got any other points they wish to raise? There was one behind there, I think. Can we go to Mr. Stevens? I thought I saw your hand. Did I see your hand? Can we go to Mr. Stevens first?
Thank you, Leader. It was a point of clarification. Sue McCubbin politely pointed out that I didn't actually answer all of Councillor Betton's question, and then Councillor Garrett continued with the same question, which I also didn't answer. It was in relation to when will we get sight of the report. So, as I understand it, the exposing of the rack within the bar area has progressed quicker than was anticipated. So we will be getting the specialist surveyor in hopefully soon to give some initial appraisals. We hope by the time we get to the end of the 3-week period, we will have something in writing which will give us an outline and then a more comprehensive survey response later.
I think it's important as we, thank you, Mr. Stevens. I think it's important as we think about this information coming in. It's going to be fluid. It's going to require interpretation. It may require additional professional reports to give us some clarity as to the cost of various things or the solution for the repair. And we need to give people appropriate time for that. And again, thanks to Mr. Williams, have I got the name right there, Martin? I think I missed Mr. Breeden, I have, isn't it?
Burgess.
Thank you for the correction, Mr. Burgess, for all his work in supporting this. It's going to be vital that we keep listening to the advice that we get and understanding it if we're going to navigate our way through it. I think the other thing to say before I go over to Councillor Ashbury is it's clear from the report that's been written up that there has been a tremendous amount of work to take an asset that clearly would have been empty during COVID and bring it back to life. And I think that is something that obviously Councillor Garrett has spoken very positively in terms of the enjoyment him and his family have had from the asset. And I'm sure the nearly 50,000 that visited it last year would be similarly minded. And I think the strategy that Ms. Stockley has deployed has been very successful in trying to minimise the loss to the council. It is currently a loss of about 130,000, and I would be interested to hear her opinion if there hadn't been this black swan emerging over Camberley, where she thinks she might have got to this year ahead.
Thank you, Leader.
Well, as we all know, it's been a difficult 6 months with this hanging over our heads. But yeah, we were on track to be making some really good progress this year, as some of the figures that you've seen would have shown, that we've increased our average attendance per performance, which is obviously reducing those overhead costs and bringing that subsidy down. And we were hoping to be refining that even further this year. We will obviously be looking at various periods of closure, such as this current 3-week period, which will impact that. But there is certainly scope for a lot of improvement in that area, and that's something that we're continually working on.
Yeah, I think where I was getting to there, if the trajectory continued, we were going to end up break even. I think that was as a function of your hard work and the team. So thank you for that on behalf of all the members. That's a very, very positive trend. Councillor Ashbury, please.
Thank you, Leader. I have wrestled long and hard with this issue of the theatre and the sheer size of the amount of money that was approved last week at full council, and the proposal to just go ahead and do it. So I have thought about a slight change to the resolution that Councillor Skipper put forward, and Councillor Garrett is going to hate me for bringing it with less than 5 hours notice to this evening. I have copies here, if I can distribute them. But I would like to say, while they're going round and you get a chance to read my proposed changes, which we can then discuss, I'd like to say that from my point of view, I agree with what's been said, that having a theatre in Camberley is vital not only for the well-being of our residents, but also for the economy of Camberley Town Centre. The current building, as we know, has served us well for the past 58 years, but it's now starting to show its age alongside many buildings of the 1960s where RAC was used as a construction material. As has already been stated, we are currently in a position where we don't know what we don't know around some areas of the theatre building, and the work is underway to provide us with more clarity around the extent of the remediation works needed to ensure that the theatre remains safe for its patrons. I believe that once the full extent of work required is known, it should then be brought back to this committee for further scrutiny. It's in no one's interest for the theatre to remain closed while we procrastinate over this, so the wording of this proposed amended resolution is designed to give those closest to the work the ability to make the required short-term decisions to ensure that the theatre reopens in a timely manner, whilst ensuring that there is opportunity for further discussions on issues which are not time critical. We have, quite rightly in my opinion, been critical of previous administrations for spending large amounts of public money with a perceived lack of proper scrutiny, and the same charge was levelled at the current administration during last week's budget debate around these works at full council meeting. I believe this amended resolution will ensure that this extra scrutiny can be carried out by this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Just for the benefit of the councillors and others, well, particularly councillors, because others won't get to see it, it's being sent to you by Mr. Stevens, if you have your emails open, so that you'll be able to see it. But I will read it out for the benefit of the members of the public. So, the executive is asked to resolve that the initial investigations are carried out during the current 3-week closure period, with additional professional support procured to support engineering options development, informing direct cost and completion time estimates, be delegated to the Strategic Director for Environment and Community up to a direct cost of $150,000. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. For members' understanding, about $100,000 is already committed, so effectively that gives an extra buffer of $50,000 to the Strategic Director for Environment and Community. to use on additional professional fees to get clarification of some of the timelines and solutions. Point 2, additional planned repairs recommended by the relevant technical professionals to ensure that the theatre remains safe and open into the medium term, e.g. 3 to 5 years, be delegated to the Strategic Director for Environment and Community in consultation with the portfolio holder for Leisure and Culture and Leader of the Council, assisted by the Strategic Director of Finance and Customer Services, up to an additional direct cost of £175,000 and less than 3 months additional outage. That is more or less I'll just go quick commentary here. That's more or less what we think the requirement might be for the high-risk areas to be remediated and other support activities completed. And then point 3, any potential outcomes, plans and expenditure outside these parameters, as further data, guidance and options are available, are brought back to the Quora subgroup of the Executive for review and related decisions. The Quora for the Executive being 3, as people might know from the Constitution, obviously supported by the relevant officers that we probably don't need to list because it's obvious. So that's the modified resolution from Councillor Asprey's deliberations. I think, to be fair, Councillor Wheeler has been up for a while, so I'm going to go to Councillor Wheeler, if that's okay with the members in the chamber. Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I have to say thank you to Councillor Asprey for his amendment. It's not something, obviously, I have the opportunity to formally discuss or vote upon, but it seems to me to be a very pragmatic and sensible compromise from the amount that this administration is being asked to sign off. This amendment also, to a large extent, mitigates my question and my concern. And my question related to at what point is too much and what cost would be too much before we accepted that we were possibly plastering over cracks that were just too big to fill. This at least gives some checks and balance before we get to that point. But it would be good for me to know at what point we might accept raise and start again would be a better option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. It's a very fair and appropriate question. Thank you. I don't think we know the answer, and I think, and I'm being honest about that. I think because there's a combination of the direct costs, which is what we're seeing here, and then, as you've rightly explored in the background via the officers, there's the indirect cost of the closure as well. So, which is just slightly less than 100,000 a month at peak. Although all of those are probably generous assumptions for the reasons that Ms. Stockley identified in terms of how they've tried to manage the programme, and within the year in general there are also outage periods. So at peak it would be about just less than 100,000 cost. It probably starts off a bit lower than that and works up to it over time. So it is a fluid situation. We need to let the technical people do their thing. We then need to listen to their advice and then see where we stand. And I think the proposed amendment gives some breakpoints in that journey for us to reflect on exactly your question. But clearly there can be no blank checks. That is the bottom line. There is no blank checks, and I think that's where all of us had concerns around this particular issue, is that it's not just potentially limitless in terms of cost, it's also limitless in terms of potential time of outage as well. So it's the combination of the two things, the direct cost and the potential outage. It is firmly the intention, and it was a great question from Councillor Garrett as well, it is an intention of ours to try and maintain this as a viable facility. But it's not a decision we can make tonight because we don't have the facts in front of us tonight. What we can do is support the teams to navigate their way through this, and it's incredibly difficult for to do that in this uncertain environment. So I think we all have to have a lot of respect for Ms Stockley and Ms McCubbin and others that are trying to manage all of that. But so we need to support them through that journey, but we need to give it some time so we get proper facts and information and options in front of us, and then either bring it back to this group, or as was rightly pointed out, to another place should we need to finish the job, or make a decision not to finish the job. These are all options that are currently on the table. What we would like to do is explore options going forward, noting the fact that the building was built in 1966, and there are potential scenarios that we need to explore as well for the future, which links quite nicely to Councillor Skipper's culture strategy and cultural team that you want to form. So maybe you want to comment on that.
Yeah, the idea of the cultural committee is to develop and evolve the arts and culture in Camberley. We were going to use the theatre as a central hub, but the idea is to bring all those small groups and artists and heritage and museums, whoever is involved in the arts and culture and heritage, under one umbrella, so they all talk to each other, share experiences, and then use the theatre to expand that into the community so they can develop and evolve and share the experiences that people can't use in Camberley Town Centre. So it's a big project, it's a complex strategy to put together, but with Kaylee and the management team, this will work really well, I think, and in the long run it will benefit not just the council economically, but the Camberley Town Centre and the communities that surround us. So it's a win-win, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Skipper. Now, there were hands going up over there. Councillor Garrett apparently was first. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Asprey. There is frustration, but not for the reasons that you probably think. The frustration is that the second question I was going to ask at the full council meeting last week was exactly this, about breaking up the costs. But I was unable to do so because of the fact we were classing it as a motion and I was only allowed to ask one question. So, in principle, I think this is a good idea because we're not agreeing to spend as much money. Well, that's actually one of my questions, because at full council we agreed to spend 625. My rough maths makes this 325. So are we countermanding the full council meeting, or is that still, that's agreed, but we're just going to stage the money how it's spent? Is that the...
Councillor Ashbury wants to take the lead on that, so welcome.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Again, I just want to make clear that the increasing the capital budget to the 625,000, which was agreed at full council, is not in doubt with what I am proposing here. What I am proposing is that before we spend that full amount, there are some checks and balances. I have tried in the wording to make it so that it isn't restrictive for the officers and the contractors working on the building at the moment, so that they don't have to keep coming back every time they find something different, but to put it in place. And the numbers that I've put in here reflect kind of the work we're currently committed to, with an idea if we had to remediate those areas that were already identified as high risk, which are time sensitive, on the ones that we can come back and review the report on to make a decision. So I'm not recommending we change the 625,000. That was a decision at full council. So the budget is there. All I'm asking for is some checks and balances before we commit the final just under half of that amount of money.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you, Councillor Ashby. I mean, I think it's like anything, perhaps Mr Watson will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like anything in the capital programme. most of it goes in at the time as an idea with a best guess estimate as to what we'll end up spending. It's not a commitment that we're going to spend it. It's the same here. It's an amount of money that we might spend up to, and clearly we want to spend the minimum possible to keep a safe, functioning, attractive venue for residents and visitors to attend, and give ourselves some time to evaluate what the longer term perspective might be, because it's been rightly highlighted, there are other opportunities for investment in the building that we need to consider whether we wish to do those or not, and if it's a not, what are the alternatives in order to keep the cultural vibrancy of the borough alive. So, Councillor Betton was next. Councillor Betton.
It's been answered, thank you.
We like those kind of questions, thank you. Apparently, it's Councillor Mears.
It's been answered, thank you.
Please don't say it's been answered. It'd be so boring. Right, go on, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Ashbury. I agree with the other comments that have been made about the amendment. It sounds really sensible to me. What you're proposing is, rather than just authorising the spending of 625,000 straight away, you're authorising, firstly, 150,000 for the 3-week period of investigations. We know why that is urgently necessary, and then possibly another 175,000, which takes it up to 325,000. To keep the theatre open for another 3 to 5 years. So, firstly, I think the 150,000 already includes 95,000 of committed spending, or spending that's already taken place. So that's really only another 45,000. So from where we were talking about 2/3 now we're only talking about an extra 45,000 initially. And my question is, have I got all this right? And secondly, what if the estimate to keep the theatre open and safe for another 3 to 5 years is more than 175,000 overall? What would happen then? Would it come straight back? Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson. Again, I've had the benefit of thinking about the words in this for the last 2 days. The point 2 on there is, if there is immediate work that is needed within the current 3-week period, that can be approved and authorised up to, so that bringing the total up to the 325. Should the work identified be deemed to be more than the 325, I'm saying we can spend up to the 625 capital budget that was approved at full council, but before we commit to that, it comes back for further scrutiny to this committee, or in the interests of time, where we may not be able to get the whole committee together, a quorum subgroup of this committee to review that decision before committing the final spend up to the 625. So I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. I'm not suggesting that the 625 isn't the right number, or that that isn't necessarily what we will spend. All I'm advocating is some checkpoint in there to assess before we finally commit it. And I think that's just prudent financial management.
Yeah, thanks. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Just to reinforce, it's not just the absolute amount of money, it's how long the place is closed. It's potentially a double whammy. And as we were discussing in a pre-meeting, we need to try and keep that as short as possible, because people's habits change and suddenly they'll drop out of the habit. So that is part of the reason why we did push it into the agenda last week, was to make sure that the overall time that the theatre would be closed for investigation work and any follow-up work was as short as possible. And I apologise if the members were unhappy with that. It was done in the best intentions of the staff and the town, which we now know from the nice piece of work that's been done, which we shared with members as soon as possible, which we now know we get 53 pence for every pound that's spent in the theatre in the town. And when you multiply that by the number of people visiting, that's a significant number going through the tills and the number of jobs that are being protected in Camberley as a function of that activity. So it's something not to be ignored. Councillor Whitcroft, please. David Whitcroft, even, to clarify.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is probably the first time I've spoken remotely, so you'll have to forgive me if I can't be heard properly. The opposition members present tonight are not the only ones who might be feeling a certain sense of frustration, and it might be news to them to understand that the majority group members have not been made fully aware of the proposals which have come before the executive this evening. And often there would be concern about that. But there are occasions when members have to trust to the skills of the executive and indeed the senior officer team to come to a sensible conclusion. And I think the fluidity of the current situation is just one of those occasions. Officers and members have had an incredibly difficult problem, in my opinion, which has not only changed day by day, but it's almost changing hour by hour, as we've heard this evening. Yet throughout all of those difficulties, what we've ended up with here this evening, I think, is a very sensible approach, which extends really from the initial planning, which was put in place last Wednesday. So the pieces of the jigsaw are coming together, although, as we've heard, we're not actually going to know what the full picture is for some weeks and possibly months to come. So in conclusion, I would simply like to congratulate the executive and their supporting officers for struggling through this very difficult situation and coming up with a proposal which appears to me and others, as we've heard, to be eminently sensible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you. I guess my question with regards to this proposal is the agenda report that we've got here before us already identifies a vast amount of work that needs to be done. So we're already aware of the work that does need to take place. I'm not going to quote because I believe that would force us into part two. But my question is, the point 2 of this proposal puts in a check, which I'm in full agreement. I think is important to have that check and balance. But will it essentially force us to come to a future executive committee just to agree to continue with the works? Because we will have already started works based on the proposal and based on the recommendation from Councillor Ashbury that we would start them. Are we likely going to find ourselves in a position where we would then stop midway because we've reached the financial target? So my question is, what would be the practical outcome of that further meeting? If will it be possible to actually stop the process after spending a significant amount of money?
It's always possible to stop spending money. Councillor Ashbury, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rice. The rationale behind breaking it down into the kind of bite-sized chunks reflects the possibility that some of the areas of the theatre which are currently marked as amber risk we may be able to manage that risk by a regime of inspections, etc., and therefore we will not have to carry out the full amount of works in the annex laid out here. That was the rationale for breaking that out like that. That gives us a chance to come back to make that decision as to whether we do that, and whether we actually commit to spending the money where we may be able to maintain the integrity of the building through other means. It may not. I'm not a structural engineer. I don't know. I just think it would be prudent to put a check in there so that we understand.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Just 1 second while I take some. Hold your horses, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, everybody, for your forbearance. Just give me another minute. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your forbearance, members. Was there any other? Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick question this time. I think, thinking about the overall plan for the theatre, not just the expense that's being debated at this point, it's a balance between the council's finances, which are obviously at risk, as we know, the local economy, which we have a duty to try and support, and the local cultural facilities, which we also have a duty to try and support. And I think a lot of how we address this decision rests on how reliable the audience survey is at this point, and what confidence we have in it. Is it, I mean, I know a lot of people took part in it, but obviously they were self-selecting. So I guess my question is probably for the director, strategic director, how much confidence do we have in that survey, and is it enough confidence to make potentially £1 million decision, or maybe more than that decision?
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, perhaps in that context, Mr. Stevens, you also just talk about, more widely, the discussion around how we understand the resident needs going forward, etc. Thank you.
There seems to be a problem with the buttons this evening. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. The audience survey is the first part of a wider social, economic and cultural impact assessment that Councillor Skipper referred to earlier on. So you're right, it's a self-selecting survey, if you like. There's our existing customer base, but then there's a wider approach that looks at everything that you've just referred to. So it'll give us a greater picture of what the actual benefit of Camberley Theatre is, as opposed to some of the national picture, which is referred to in the executive report. As soon as we have the survey results, which I'm not sure what the indicative timescale was. By the mid to end of May, clearly we'll circulate that, and that can then form part of that wider discussion around the future.
That's great.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. You can see there's a little bit of discussion going on here in terms of process and procedure, but thank you for bearing with us. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Councillor Garrett.
It's actually a very short question. That point. The questionnaire, as far as I'm aware, was on Facebook. I think I saw it. I didn't, as a customer of County Theatre, see an email. Now, that may be because I'm not on the mailing list. But my question is twofold. Has it gone out to customers, in which case I didn't get one? Secondly, is it something we're going to start asking residents when they come to see a show, obviously when it reopens, hopefully when it reopens, what their feelings are? Because you're right, people are picking to answer that, which is brilliant, but you also want the people that are actually using the venue to answer a questionnaire as well. They're still deeply engrossed over there.
I was hoping Mr. Stevens would answer. Garrett. Mr. Stevens.
Gone off again. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. I'm going to refer you to our resident expert and venue manager, Kaylee Stockley, if I may.
Thank you. So just for some clarity around that survey that went out and its purpose, because there does seem to have been a slight misconception from a lot of people as well that this was almost a customer satisfaction survey, and it had a very specific purpose. It was designed to measure economic impact of people visiting our theatre. So that not just for us, but that wider economic impact. So when they visit the theatre, do they eat in town? Do they park in the town? Do they do their shopping when they come to the Panto? All of those things, as well as the cultural impact. So as for those of you who looked at the survey, it covered things like if you didn't go to the theatre to see this show, how else would you have engaged with culture? Or in a lot of cases, people would have stayed at home. So it did have quite a specific intention. So that's in terms of the design and the information that it gathered. But we also did send it out to our entire mailing list, which is just over 20,000 people. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, things can end up in spam, as we find quite often, which may have been the case for you. But it certainly was mailed out to a lot of people. And then we backed that up by also putting it on social media. These kind of surveys would normally run for around 4 to 6 weeks. And due to the nature of what we're discussing this evening and the urgency of it, we had that condensed down to a 2-week period. So considering we did it in about a third of the expected time, the response rate was huge.
Councillor Batten.
Thank you. It's not related to the RAC. The capacity of the theatre is 400 seats, yes? When the seats are out, what is the capacity then? Because I've been and still go to gigs and things where people are standing. How many people could be got into the theatre standing?
Our standing capacity is 520 in the auditorium.
Good. Right. I do want to bring this to a close. I am really appreciating all the input, partly so I can do some stuff on the side here. Councillor Rise, please.
A very quick question. Just following on from Ms Stockley's comment with regards to the survey, and it done in a short period of time, are we planning on extending that now to do a longer period, to fit in with the 4 to 6 weeks that you normally would?
Thanks, Councillor Rice. We are doing further work around that. So the initial survey was designed based on the information that we needed to turn around within 2 weeks. There's further work to be done in terms of the demography of our audiences and where people, we're bringing people in from different areas and things like that, as well as the cultural requirements. So there is further work to be done, yeah.
Thank you. So, again, thank you everybody for your support. I think been a good recognition. This is a bit of a tricky subject. The reason that we've been in a little bit of a huddle here is concern around point 3 of the recommendation and the practicality of that. And we were told today by the peer review team from the LGA that we should be looking to focus on continuous improvement all the time. So we've done that in real time here. Perhaps Mr. Ramtahal could just check he's happy with this from a constitutional perspective and everything else. But point 3, we will just slightly tweak it to say, any potential outcomes, plans and expenditure outside these parameters, as further data, guidance and options are available, is delegated to the Strategic Director of Environment and Community in consultation with a quorum of the Property and Regeneration Working Group members up to £625,000. Any objection?
Yes, I do object to that. I would recommend that you remove the word Property Investment Working Group and replace with the executive.
So the reason that we were suggesting the original wording, before Mr. Roberts pointed out there were some concerns around it, was to allow agility. We are, as we've said before, we're dealing with a fairly fluid situation here, and we want to be able to minimise the time the theatre is closed, and there is a formality that goes with the executive or a subgroup of the executive which would slow the process down. The ability to have a property and regeneration working group, which many of the executive is on, Councillor Ashbury, myself, Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Garrett, and yourself, indeed, Councillor Rise, as a substitute from time to time, does just give us, I'm terribly sorry, Councillor Phelan Cook, does give us just a little bit more agility to react to events as they unfold, albeit up to the 625,000 limit. Could you make clearer your concerns, Councillor Rice, please?
While I have no concerns with the decision-making capabilities of the members of that working group, I just take you back to the point you made earlier, Leader, with regards to being openness and transparent as much as possible. The Property and Regeneration Working Group is a closed meeting, and I think it's really important that, I think as members have made points tonight about openness, that despite the formality of the executive, I think a decision taken by the executive should be taken by the executive at a later date. I also make the point that the executive and the Property Regeneration Working Group meet on a similar base, on a regular timetable, once monthly. So the speed that an executive can be formed or a paper can be brought to is not that difficult. So I would recommend that we keep these decisions in the public as much as possible. I think that should be the aim that we strive for.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Garrett, please.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on, obviously the original paper said a subgroup of the executive, so that wasn't even going to be the executive. So is that, so are you wanting to be the full executive, or if it's a subgroup, then the working group, the subgroup wouldn't be on video any more than the property working group? So I just want to pick up on that point.
Thank you. This thing's going out the window, I think, later. Right. So I think the advice from Mr. Roberts is that either way, it's then a formal meeting. So effectively, it can be a full executive, but in the interest of time, it could be a quorum, which you appreciate is 3. So and they can be held faster if required and more frequently if required, from memory. But still with 5 days' notice, yeah, with the formal process that goes with it. Okay, so Councillor Ashbury, and then we are going to be done taking on board Councillor Rise's challenge.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back to Councillor Garrett's point. The reason it was a subgroup was exactly as the leader has said. We may need to convene a meeting that is outside of our normal rhythm of meetings, and we may not be able to get the whole exec there. That was why it was worded in the way it was. Ideally, we'd get the whole exec there, even at short notice. But why we said it had to be a quorum group was such that we could do that. And we may have to convene at short notice. I accept that.
Good. Thank you, everybody. So the executive is resolved as per the paper. I won't read it out again without any changes in omissions. The net effect of that is that it would require the formality. It may be an extraordinary executive meeting. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your support on that. I've just blown my chances by a significant margin of beating Councillor Rise's time, but there is always future events where that can be done. It was an important topic, and therefore it was super important we spent the right time on it, and thank you, everybody, for your contributions. And again, thank you to the team for hanging in there and keep the faith, and hopefully things will work out positive in terms of the outcomes from the inspections. Right, we move on to item 6. Do we wish to go into exempt at this point, or are we going to stay open for a while and then go into exempt? Can I have a steer from...
Leader, I think if members are comfortable with asking questions and having a debate about the elements that are in public, I think we can do that as long as possible, and then only go into exempt if there are any questions specifically about the exempt annex.
Right, and we will need to go into exempt for the final decision, given, some changes to the exempt item. So, would you like to introduce it, please?
Yes. Right, so the paper you've got in your agenda pack this evening is asking for a sum of money, which we'll discuss in part 2, to implement kiosk infrastructure in the main square. The 24-25 business plan identified that space as an area that we could make more of an opportunity of. We could actually make it more of a destination space. And this sum of money that we're asking for will enable us to do that. We've got 3 businesses that are already, with legal department, looking to take leases into those spaces. And we'd very much like to have them there trading by Christmas. So I'd welcome any questions that you've got on the open section of this agenda paper.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Rowlands was up first. Councillor Rowlands, please.
A comparison possibly with Egham and the excellent restaurants that are available there. I realise there's got a university adjacent, but it seems to me that we've got a paucity of good restaurants at the moment in Camberley, and this would be very welcome. But I think when we're designing this restaurant, we should think, what are the virtues of some of the good restaurants which you can find in Egham? What are their virtues? And look to possibly incorporating that in any plans that go forward. Because at the moment, it's not a brilliant picture, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Rowlands. The idea of these kiosks in the town centre is to increase dwell time of people who are actually shopping, and the businesses that are looking to take these kiosks are more what we would consider sort of pocket money purchases, so they would actually increase the dwell time of younger residents and of people who are not necessarily there to have a big meal and have a big day out, but it will increase the dwell time of people looking to pop out and meet for a coffee or something like that. So it's a different offering for a different section of people using our town centre.
Councillor Glowrock was first, was she? Yeah, Councillor Glowrock, please. Yeah.
I'd just like to say that I think it's a very good idea, this, and I think it will give an added thing to that part of the town. One question I have is that the main, coffee place will have its own seating, correct? And I wondered if the other seats or more will be kept, because I noticed that lots of people sit there. Today when I went through, nearly all the seats were taken. And there's quite a nice atmosphere as people sitting there chatting. So I'm just a bit worried that it would only be seats for people, eating and drinking, and you sort of lose some of the other seats.
Thanks, Councillor Glowrock. There will still be... Yeah, there will still be public seating in the area of people that aren't using those kiosks or the cafes. So it might be slightly reduced, but there will certainly still be areas for people to sit that are just, using the town for other purposes.
I think it was Councillor Mears next, yeah? Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great idea. Given the interest, I think you said 3 people you're in discussions with to fill the space. Is there any consideration going on about, I think it's Cambridge Square, outside of House of Fraser, currently perhaps underutilised?
Those are all discussions that are currently happening in the Property and Regeneration Working Group, as Councillor Garrett knows. They're ongoing, and they would be brought to a future executive and discussed as part of a future paper.
Must be Councillor Garrett.
Thank you. Just a memo to Tech, because if Mr McDonald doesn't throw it out, I might do. Yeah, so fully supportive of this, no surprise there. I'm hoping the answer to this question is to be yes. My daughter uses Secret Stage Court on a regular basis, as many parents do. And on most evenings, they're there till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. The Costa, that is currently opposite Secret Stage Court, shuts about 5:30, 6 o'clock. There are parents that are dropping their children off and then driving away from Camberley. These parents could be sitting in a coffee shop in the centre of the square drinking coffee. Now, I appreciate that means there are and I know it's not ours, and this is a conversation to have with obviously the people that will be servicing it. But there is an element of, I know we're trying to get nighttime economy, and I don't know we necessarily want nighttime economy in the square, but there are people that are going away because they can't have a coffee because they dropped their kids off for an hour. So my question is there any way, and I don't know what the working hours are going to be, but is there any way to make it so they're a little bit later in the evening?
Thanks, Councillor Garrett. I don't know what the operating hours of these businesses are going to be. That would be entirely up to them, in coordination with the opening times of the centre. I can certainly make sure they're aware that you're there at Secret Stage Court in the evening and might like a coffee. So I'll have the conversation.
I think we've seen who the coffee addicts are in the group today. Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Leader. I just wondered what communication had been undertaken with the existing businesses that may be in competition with these locations, and whether or not the viability of those might be impacted by the introduction of these pop-up stands.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Weir. I'd like to pass that question over to Mr Breeden, if I can, please.
Thank you for the question. Whenever we consider any new letting, we consider the wider impact on the tenant mix of the centre and whether it's a good fit. We wouldn't consult with businesses that might do something similar. One would expect anyone would say they would dislike competition, would be their routine reaction. And anyone you introduce into a shopping centre normally competes with someone else to an extent. So I think our job is to bring in the best operators, do have a mind as to whether they have the ability to trade successfully, but it is a competitive trading environment.
Councillor Wilson, please.
A quick question. You said that the cost of this is a certain amount of money because we're in public session. So in the public agenda pack, under recommendation, so it's page 10, it says what that amount of money is. Is that a problem?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wilson. We're going to move into part 2 and we're going to discuss that sum of money, as we've had an update just today which didn't make it into the agenda pack.
Oh, thanks. Understood.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. If maybe I think one. I think they're probably going over there, Mr. Breeden. Sorry. So 8.2, and apologies for maybe the ignorance or not reading it properly. Whilst the residual mall space rateable value was reduced to 7,700 per annum, should the space remain vacant, there could potentially be further rates payable for any kiosk space or similar that would form separate assessments in their own right. I understand each individual word. I don't understand how they're connected. And what should I take away from that paragraph 8.2, please?
This section setting out some of the risks. So if we create these kiosk spaces, the valuation office may decide that that is a rateable hereditament or a rateable piece of lettable space. And therefore, should it not let, or should an occupier fail there and it become empty, then as landlord, we would have to pay the rates attributable to that space.
Okay, and there's a potential that they would upgrade the current rateable value, is there, with this?
Correct.
Sorry, ping-ponging here. Is that factored into the business case?
The base case is that they're all let, because they're all in solicitors' hands at the moment in lettings.
Second one from my side. I think it's delegated to Praxis to project manage this. Is that correct? And I assume they have all the relevant qualifications to oversee that in a public, those kind of works in a public space.
Correct. They've got a team that are experienced in working in shopping centres and live environments.
Lastly, you'll be glad to know, it talks about in 8.5, I am jumping around, I apologise, 8.5, no direct impact to retailers, likely to be a period of noisy works, blah, 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 along with communal areas within the central square closed to the public for periods of time. Does that mean just literally the box shape in the middle, the rectangle in the middle will be locked out, or well, what does that mean in terms of reducing access to the other retailers?
There'll be access to all the other retailers. They'll need a working area that will be slightly larger than the area that are going to be demised to tenants as they're building the project.
Thank you. That was my understanding. I just wanted to check. Perfect. Anything from Councillor Rice, please?
Thank you. Are these similar to the kiosks that used to be in that part of the town centre many, many years ago? Because I think those were movable. Are these going to be permanent structures, or are they going to be kind of movable?
They're not dissimilar, but they won't be the kind of kiosks that you can just pick up and run away with. So they'll be solid enough to be permanent.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go into exempt, I think, to continue the discussion. Right, okay. 1 second. I have to read all the words again, don't I? Oh, don't worry, I'll find it. It's here. Take time. Okay, the executive is advised to resolve that under Regulation 4 of the Local Authority Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the ground that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as set out below. Item 6, Paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Item 7, Paragraph 3, information related to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Are we so agreed to exclude?